I'm sorry for being insensitive the other day. That's what Eliza, who's usually sarcastic, said to me as she bowed her head. For all I know, maybe Eliza was genuinely apologizing this time, reflecting on her past behavior. I let my guard down because of her apology. Little did I know that a police-involved incident was about to unfold. My name is Lisa. I've been working as a daycare teacher, a dream job, since my childhood. My husband Jace and I have been married for 3 years now. As we are enjoying a lazy day off, a call came in from my mother-in-law, Eliza. "You should come visit us soon. You haven't been home for 6 months." Upon hearing Eliza's voice, Jace made a face of annoyance. Though my in-laws' house is just a 30-minute drive away, Jace never seems eager to visit Eliza. He's always been put off by his mother's excessive meddling and maintains some distance. Eliza has always thrown jabs at me, ever since we got married, as if blaming me for taking away her only son. Though I find Eliza difficult, I have no choice but to go when called. The last time she told us to visit and we didn't, she showed up at our house unannounced. To avoid that hassle, it's better to go see her before she takes matters into her own hands. Sure enough, upon visiting for the first time in 6 months, the sarcastic comments started flying. Every time I visit, I feel stressed, being pestered about not having children yet. "You can't have kids because you're busy working. A woman should stay home." My father-in-law, Derek, a retired middle school teacher, often had to work on weekends due to his hectic schedule. Housewife Eliza always boasted, "I raised Jace all by myself. We can't make ends meet on my salary alone." Jace immediately encountered Eliza's snide remark. I want to work because being a daycare teacher was my dream, especially this year as I'm in charge of the seniors. I want to see them through to graduation. I explained that we're not planning to have kids yet, but that just led to more insults. "I was against your marriage from the start. What good does a daycare teacher do for society? You're just playing with kids all day, aren't you?" I was angry at being accused of just playing, but I let it slide with a wry smile. I can't let every one of Eliza's words get to me. Once she started her insults, there was no stopping her. "These days, mothers are terrible for leaving their kids so young. I wonder if it's mostly single moms or poor families." Eliza let out an exaggerated sigh. I can handle her criticizing me for not having a job or kids, but I can't keep my emotions in check when it comes to her prejudices against parents. Look, parents are struggling every day to balance work and raising their kids. What you've done, spending so much time with your children, is commendable. But not every family can afford to have a stay-at-home parent. So stop making such comments. "How dare you argue with me when you can't even have children?" Eliza retorted. As Eliza and I glared at each other, Derek finally spoke up. "Eliza, you're out of line. Watch your words." I was surprised that Derek came to my defense. He's a man of few words and usually stays quiet when we visit. Apparently, Eliza doesn't realize she's being offensive. "What's wrong with speaking the truth? Children who are left in daycare probably won't turn out well," she continued. Ignoring Derek's warning, Eliza reiterated her prejudiced views. Angry at her comments, Jace started to hastily get ready to leave. "Enough is enough. Lisa, let's go." Eliza wanted to stop her son, but Jace was already heading for the door without looking back. "He's become so cold to me since he got married." Eliza became hysterical, perhaps because her son was being cold to her. She blames me, but Jace's cold behavior isn't new. Ever since he moved out, he began questioning Eliza's excessive interference. I was shocked to learn she'd go into his apartment with her own key and read all his mail. "What are you standing there for? Go get Jace right now," she commanded. Jace, who had already left the house, was ordered to be called back. Feeling irritated, wondering why I had to be given orders in the first place. It's sad, isn't it? You were always around, yet you're disliked. You mistake it for love, but it's just excessive interference. "Thank you for showing me how not to raise a child," I snapped. I knew we wouldn't see each other for a while, so I let it all out. I was also angry about her terrible comments about daycare parents. I felt a sense of relief getting that off my chest. Her face turned red with rage. "You'll see. I'll kick a nasty woman like you out of my house." Eliza slammed the front door after kicking me out. I figured this means I won't be called or visited for a while. I told Jace, who was waiting for me outside the entrance, what had happened. "Good on you for standing up to Mom. We'll have some peace for a while now." I felt reassured by Jace's words, but what Eliza said last still bothered me. If we don't hear from her, I guess we don't have to visit for Christmas. A few days after thinking this, Jace got a message from Eliza. "She's asking if we'd like to come to a pizza party. She said she regrets what she said to Lisa and wants to apologize." Jace asked me what I thought, and I hesitated. Honestly, I can't imagine Eliza actually apologizing. "The olives on the pizza are from a friend's farm. They're really fragrant and delicious. Let's just go, and if Mom starts her snide remarks again, we'll just take the pizza and leave." I couldn't help but laugh at Jace's suggestion. That's when I remembered Jace has a real love for pizza. All right, let's go. I'm curious to see if Eliza will actually apologize. So we decided to visit my in-laws' home again on our next day off. As soon as we arrived, Eliza immediately apologized. "I'm sorry for my insensitive remarks the other day. Can you forgive me?" Eliza's deep apology made her seem like a different person. After that, Eliza and I chatted and laughed. This might be a first since we got married. "Liza, you sit here. If you want seconds, just let me know." Eliza had even portioned out several pieces of pizza for each of us. Apparently, she's a bit of a germaphobe, even when it comes to family. The fresh pizza emitted an appetizing aroma. I noticed Derek wasn't around as we sat down to eat. According to Eliza, he was working in the yard, and she said to eat without him. "Guess we'll start then." Jace quickly grabbed a slice and took a big bite. The moment Jace picked up the pizza, I smelled its wonderful aroma. Eliza urged us to eat the hot pizza quickly, so I took a slice. The colorful veggies on top looked delicious. Eager to enjoy the acclaimed olives, I took a careful bite. But the moment I bit into it, something fell off. The bacon was juicy, and the abundant veggies were delicious. But the olives and asparagus don't have any fragrance, I muttered in a low voice. But I couldn't complain about food that was prepared for us. "Jace, do you taste or smell the olives on your pizza?" I quietly asked Jace, making sure Eliza couldn't hear. He nodded, as if it were a given. I thought maybe my nose was stuffed because I was catching a cold, so I continued to eat. 20 minutes after we started eating, Derek comes back from the yard and takes his seat. I must have looked puzzled while examining the pizza toppings. He asked what was wrong. I looked at Derek and said, "I was just thinking. I don't smell any olives or asparagus." Then Eliza's voice comes from the kitchen. "It's on there. Trust me." The moment I hear Eliza's laughter, Derek slams my plate off the table. "Spit it out. How much did you eat?" The plate shatters loudly on the floor. Caught off guard by Derek's uncharacteristic yelling, I stammer, I ate a few slices." Jace asks what's going on, but Derek just keeps insisting that I spit it out. Eliza, on the other hand, doesn't come out of the kitchen even though Derek is shouting. Confused, I get up to head to the bathroom and feel incredibly dizzy. I rush to the toilet and throw up repeatedly. I start sweating profusely and collapse in the bathroom. "Call an ambulance, now!" I hear Derek instructing Jace, and it sounds like he's also yelling something at Eliza in the distance. Next thing I know, I'm lying in a hospital bed. Apparently, I fainted temporarily due to dehydration from vomiting so much. "You're going to be fine. We got you treated right away," Jay says, looking almost in tears, as he explains what happened. Turns out, the pizza I ate contained red spider lily, a plant considered poisonous. While it's known for its beautiful flowers, the bulb resembles olives, and the stem looks like asparagus. To an untrained eye, it could easily be mistaken. Quick-thinking Derek had sent a portion of the pizza with Jace to be analyzed, revealing the presence of red spider lily. Is Jace okay? I was concerned as he had been eating silently.
We had all the pizzas checked, but...
Jace hesitates.
The only pizza that had red spider lily was yours, Lisa.
Chills run down my spine at this revelation, meaning someone intentionally fed me the poisonous plant. And the only person who could have done that was Eliza, who made the pizza herself. The doctor at the hospital says they need to report the food poisoning incident to the health department and asks for details. After hearing the situation, the doctor clearly thinks Eliza's behavior is suspicious and suggests contacting the police. Jace agrees, but says he needs time to process everything.
I can't think of her as my mother anymore. She's a criminal. What would have happened if Dad hadn't noticed?
I recall seeing news about people dying from consuming red spider lily. The thought that I could have been one of them terrifies me. First, I want to talk to Derek. I'm too scared to speak with Eliza right now. When we leave the hospital, we call Derek. He had left multiple calls and messages. However, what's even more terrifying is that there had been no communication from Eliza.
Are you okay? No matter how much I question Eliza, all she says is that she made a mistake, but I'm sure she did it on purpose.
Even the usually reserved Derek seemed agitated.
I've been holding back, but I can't take it anymore. She really is something.
Upon hearing about Eliza's shocking past from Derek, both Jace and I were stunned. Eliza lured me in, claiming she wanted to apologize, but she intended to harm me all along. Anger surged within both Jace and me, so we decided to confront Eliza directly. When we arrived at the parents-in-law's house, Eliza was sitting there, looking exhausted. She must have been scolded by Derek. Yet she didn't apologize or show any sign of concern upon seeing me. I never thought Derek would catch on. I was hoping to get rid of you, the audacious woman that you are. Jace snapped at Eliza's brazen attitude.
You've got to be kidding! You criminal!
Eliza seemed rattled being called a criminal by her own son. What do you mean? I did this for Jace's sake. If he stays with you, he'll never see his children. I'll find him a better partner, so just leave. Eliza didn't seem to feel any remorse for putting poisonous red spider lily in my food. So you intentionally mixed red spider lily. You wanted me to lose my life? Was this premeditated? Yes, I did it on purpose. Red spider lily grows nearby. It's easy to get. It's a shame you didn't eat more. You would have done more than just throw up. Jace lunged at Eliza in rage. I stopped Jace and pulled out the voice recorder I had in my chest pocket. Eliza, you've confessed to intentionally harming me, and it's all on this recorder. I'll be filing a damage report with the police. Eliza paled at the mention of the police. What? You'd send a family member to prison? Yes, and both Derek and Jace have agreed. Besides, you've done the same to Derek in the past. I relayed what I'd heard from Derek. There had been a major fight over a trivial matter before. The day after the big fight, Derek noticed that dinner's pizza had no smell of olives. As a former middle school teacher, he was always cautious about food poisoning and knew what could be toxic. Instantly, he thought of red spider lily. Derek faked a stomachache and didn't touch the pizza. After Eliza went to bed, he checked the trash can and found remnants of red spider lily, which terrified him. Because of his past experiences, he was able to quickly tell me to spit it out.
I can tolerate it if it's just me, but I can't allow harm to come to someone important to my son. We're getting divorced now.
Derek had been able to focus on work because of Eliza's support. She had helped raise Jace, so he couldn't easily bring himself to say divorce. He knew red spider lily had been mixed into the pizza, but never blamed Eliza before. But now, he seemed resolved to give up on Eliza. Eliza, who never thought divorce was on the table, was stunned. How am I supposed to live now?
I'll give you this house. We have some savings. They'll be your retirement fund once we distribute the property.
Derek continued talking about divorce, like he'd been planning it all along. Eliza barely had a moment to interject. While they were discussing the divorce, we decided to leave the house. We'll go to the police station with Jace. Please cooperate once the investigation starts, I said, and headed straight to the police station. The damage report was accepted, so an investigation into Eliza would soon begin. After that, Eliza started calling us almost daily. Please, retract the damage report. Her voice was full of exhaustion. Derek divorced her soon after and moved out. Between the police coming and Jace leaving, nasty rumors about Eliza had started in the neighborhood. Though she begged for help, I had no sympathy. I can't deal with any more persistent phone calls. Even if I change my phone number, there's nothing stopping them from just showing up at my house. Fed up with even having to deal with this, I finally said, Fine, I'll retract the damage report. But never show your face to us again. Even when a grandchild is born, you won't meet them. If you approach us, I'll consult the police. This seemed to shock Eliza, who had been eagerly awaiting a grandchild. However, she must have thought that a criminal record would be more damaging. Eliza ended up paying me settlement money, so I withdrew the damage report. She probably used the money from a property division she got during her divorce from Derek, so her savings must have taken a big hit. I heard from Derek that Eliza couldn't take the neighborhood gossip anymore, and eventually sold her house to move to a cheaper rental in Philadelphia. Apparently, she's been calling Derek, wanting to get back together, but he made it clear that's not happening. From here on out, Eliza is likely facing a lonely life on her own. As for Derek, he moved close to our house. I've grown to love Derek, who I can really count on. I'm sure that even if we have grandchildren in the future, Derek will be there to protect them.
Mr. Roberts, you have been fired. Well, why? It doesn't matter why. The decision has been made. One day, when I was thinking I've only got a year before retiring, a young manager moved into my department. One day, he called me over and abruptly announced that he was firing me. I asked him why, but he refused to answer, and I had to give in. I felt lost and told my wife about what happened. My wife looked surprised. I went to the office the next day to pick up my belongings and found it in disarray. My name is Stephen Roberts. I'm an ordinary worker at a securities firm. I joined this company at 30 years old, and I've worked hard here for the past 29 years. I was only a year away from retiring. Mr. Roberts, I'd like to speak with you about this handover. Let's see, are you talking about this client? Yes, I've been assigned this company, and I'm not sure how we should handle them. I think it's better to have an in-depth meeting with them. They are extremely cautious because this is not a small transaction. It will go smoothly if we can alleviate their concerns during our meetings. I see. Thank you so much. As I approached retirement, I was delegating my responsibilities to my subordinate. I was relieved to have a break in my work and was eager to devote the rest of the year to internal projects. Then, one day, someone transferred from Tokyo to our department. The branch manager introduced me to the man, and I noticed that he was still a young employee. A new employee has moved to our department? I wondered why. A new general manager has just been transferred to our department, he said. His name is Taylor Norris. Please introduce yourself. I have recently been assigned to this department and promoted to manager. My name is Taylor Norris. I am still young, but I will do my best to lead you all in the same manner that my father led this company. I am excited to work with you all. Hearing the surname Norris reminded me of the CEO's son's existence. And he is the CEO's son. I was convinced he was the CEO's son and that he had been appointed to the unusual position of department head at the age of 25. Who created this report? I did indeed. Why is the document in this format? Can you make it more readable? The format for this document was decided beforehand, and I only followed what was decided. What? I don't care when it was decided, but can't you revise it? If I find it difficult, I believe my father, the CEO, will find it more difficult. Do you give speeches like that in front of the president? I sincerely apologized. If I succeed my father as president and was presented with this document, I wouldn't want to read through it. Please make documents that will catch my attention. He would mention his father whenever he would speak. I know that new manager is the CEO's son, but he is so arrogant. He simply assigns the work to us and then leaves it to us. The other day, he complained even though I made a document exactly as he said, and that whenever I mentioned anything, he would bring up his father's name, so it's difficult to talk to him, people will complain. In fact, I heard him mention his father's name several times. I didn't pay attention to him because I was going to retire in a year. Mr. Roberts, could you please come in here for a moment? Can I assist you with something? Let's talk in private in the meeting room. Certainly. I returned after my lunch break to resume my work, but I was immediately summoned by the manager. I wondered what I had done wrong as I was suddenly summoned to a meeting. Was it about the new client? Or was there an issue with a previous client? Or was it something more serious? I had no idea why I had been summoned. Sir, am I in any trouble? Is it something else entirely? No, it's just a different matter. I asked what the meeting was about, but wasn't told any details, and was asked to come to the meeting room. So, as I went to the meeting room, I was thinking about why I was summoned. Well, please have a seat, he said. Yes, sir. I'm going to be direct. Mr. Roberts, you are fired. I was taken aback by the abrupt announcement of my dismissal and found myself at a loss for words. As he speaks, the manager holds out the termination letter from across the table, but I'm trying to remember what I've done, so his voice gone right past me. I tried to ask him why and managed to wring a voice out. However, the manager did not provide the specific reason for the dismissal, but simply replied, "This matter has already been decided." Unsatisfied with the answer, I repeatedly asked for a reason, only to be brushed off with, "It's a decision that's been made. You are retiring next year anyway, so why think of it as an early retirement?" "No, but it's still a year away, and I'm still physically capable of working as hard as anyone else. I heard you've already completed handovers, and you don't do any outside work, do you? You're physically too old, aren't you?" "That is not correct." "In any case, it has been decided that you'll be fired, so leave the rest to us, young people." "That's not fair. Don't you know who I am, Mr. Roberts? I could even tell the CEO if I wanted to. My decision is the same as the CEO's. The manager then left the room. I was left in a daze, unsure of what to do. After that, I had no choice but to return home, left speechless. What should I tell my wife? I have to tell her anyway. My mind was racing as I drove home, wondering what I was going to tell my wife and whether I would cause her unnecessary worry. I'm home. Welcome home. I've made dinner. I'll get changed and be there right away. I returned home with a heavy heart and decided to talk to my wife about my firing during dinner. I have something important to tell you, I explained. Has it anything to do with you feeling down when you got home today? Yes, I have been laid off from my job. I couldn't look my wife in the eyes as I spoke. I couldn't help but look down, worried about how much I would disappoint her, when I heard a surprising response. I'm so happy you have left your company at last. I expected my wife to be worried about me, so I looked up in surprise when I heard her reply full of happiness. You've put in so much effort. Let's take it easy from now on. When I looked at my wife's face, she was smiling and seemed to be in a good mood. And my wife held no grudge against me for being fired. Well, I'm off to work, she said. Have a safe journey. I'm just going to get my stuff and will return early. I went to the office the next day to gather my belongings. The atmosphere in the office was unusual when I entered as usual. What is its identity? Who did it? What's wrong with this client? There's a phone call for you, sir. Another phone call in these circumstances? When I arrived on my floor, the manager was in a panic. What's happened this morning? I asked. Why is the manager in a panic? Well, I just heard that our major clients are calling to cancel their contracts one by one, and we don't know why, my colleague explained. When I asked my colleague what was causing the uproar, he told me that there had been a string of cancellation by large clients today. As a result, the person in charge of each major client was in constant contact, and the manager was frustrated because he couldn't figure out what was wrong. Even after noon, things had not improved. The number of contracts canceled had increased since the morning, and the general manager's face was pale. Despite the situation, I felt I had to make a final speech, so I approached the manager, but he said, "I'm not in the mood for this right now. Can we finish this later?" He brushed me aside. So I said my goodbye to the other employees. While I was greeting them, the manager's voice could still be heard echoing around the room. "Are you in contact with them? It will be a significant loss if we get any more cancellations. Do you realize that if that happens, the first people to be fired will be those below you? But I've been trying to contact my clients since this morning." Then consider going directly to the company to apologize. You are completely useless. This is why you can't get promoted. Please be more considerate in your work if you are supposed to be in charge. You don't need to be so harsh. What is a problem? Are you going to talk back to me? Do it after you have solved this problem. The general manager continued cursing at his subordinates, switching targets one after the other. I couldn't even say goodbye in such circumstances, so I quickly packed my belongings and returned home. Well, since I've already been fired, there's nothing I can do to find out why. When I told my wife about the situation at work, she laughed and said, "Oh, your company, they actually had a lot of contracts with our group companies. My company, you see, owns a number of restaurants. So I had contracts with the company you worked for, but I canceled them all." "Why would you do such a thing? Are you sure it's because I was laid off?" "Well, that's one reason, but I didn't think much of your company in the first place. The salesmen were polite and nice, but when I went to the company for meetings, I got the impression that the company was not very open, and the salesmen were only polite at first." "Oh, really? So when I heard you were being laid off, I thought it would be a good opportunity. As a result, I canceled everything. In fact, my wife is the chairman of a holding company that owns and operates a number of well-known restaurants. The restaurants she manages had signed contracts with my company, but she didn't think well of my company and took advantage of the opportunity to cancel them all at once." I couldn't conceal my surprise, but to be honest, I was relieved. "It's unfortunate that you had to leave your job due to the restructuring, but let's take it easy from now on," she said. "I agree. It's a little early for me, but I'll take it easy." "Yes, you've worked so hard all along, and I like to spend some time with you now that I'm stepping down as chairman. I've already chosen my replacement. Despite being laid off, I had been with the company for 29 years and had enough savings. And my wife said that due to my early retirement, she will hand over the chairmanship to her successor. We entered into an early retirement and started spending our days leisurely."
My name is Maggie. I'd been solely focused on my work without any romantic entanglements until the age of 28. Or rather, I realized that I'd become 28 years old without even noticing due to the overwhelming busyness. Some of my junior colleagues started getting married as early as 24 or 25, and deep down, I felt a sense of urgency. I wonder if I'm going to spend the rest of my life at this company. Sure, there are senior colleagues who are older and far more experienced than me, and I can't help but admire them for their impressive professional skills. But it's also true that there's a part of me that strongly believes that I don't want to remain single forever. That's when I met George. George is kind and always prioritizes the places I want to go and the things I want to do during our dates. Having never experienced such kindness from a man before, I was swept off my feet and gladly accepted his proposal. Everyone had a good time at our wedding, huh? Yeah, I managed to get married while I was still in my 20s. What? You were worrying about that? George smiled with his usual calm expression. Come on, I was quite worried. I see. It's tough for women. Men can get married in their 40s and nobody says anything. Indeed, it seems like only women are worried about age. Speaking of women, my father-in-law has a calm personality like George, but my mother-in-law is unexpectedly assertive and strong-willed. We don't have plans to live with them, and we'd probably only go visit them for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I could tell she wasn't particularly fond of me. I plan to continue working and maintain a dual-income household, even after getting married, but it appears she has reservations about that. My income is slightly higher than George's. He candidly mentioned it to his mother, who then started pushing her old-fashioned values onto me, saying things like, a woman should focus on the household and support her husband. And men have pride. It's not good for you to work so aggressively. But in this uncertain time when layoffs and cost-cutting measures can happen, I feel the need to save up at least until we have children. George agrees with me on this, but in front of his assertive mother, he's usually overwhelmed. I should probably avoid unnecessary interactions with my mother-in-law, I thought to myself. So, which travel agency are we going with? George's voice caught me off guard. A wedding is a major event in life, but there's another important event that remains, our honeymoon. I can't decide. When it comes to a trip to Europe, different agencies offer various plans. I want to go to this place, but I'm also interested in this agency's French wine tasting tour. I pointed to various spots on a brochure marked with Post-its. I've always had a longing for Europe. Stained glass windows in churches, stylish cafes, and historic towns. An opportunity like this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So many choices. You can decide whichever one you want. George, as usual, muttered in a relaxed tone. Okay, I need to make a serious decision. We've been saving up for our future and our children, but we're planning to splurge a bit on this trip. Our honeymoon is probably the only time we can take off from work for so long. Can I sleep on it and decide tomorrow? Sure. It's not often we can go on an overseas trip. George, wearing a smile, made his way to the kitchen to enjoy a cup of coffee. Opportunities to go abroad or on vacations are rare, but above all, a honeymoon is an event that happens only once in a lifetime. I want to create unforgettable memories with George, just the two of us. That's why I didn't want to make a decision I might regret later. Even during work, I found myself constantly daydreaming about our trip whenever I had a spare moment. I did refrain from opening travel magazines except during my breaks, of course. Still haven't decided? Yeah, I was so engrossed that I didn't notice my colleague's presence until she spoke up. Hey, you better hurry up and eat before lunch break ends. Oh, right. It's already this late. Don't most European tours usually have predetermined routes? You know, visiting famous tourist spots in Italy and Rome. That's completely wrong, and Rome is in Italy. My colleague laughed and gave me a teasing look. Must be tough being a happy girl in love. Requesting time off is a whole process, and so I need to choose a travel agency soon. You're quite the contemplative lady, aren't you? I didn't pay much attention to my colleagues' teasing at the time. I was too caught up in planning this milestone in my life. Make sure you do your job responsibly, too, will you? I'm giving you the time off, after all, my boss said, as if seeing right through me. I'm sorry. I wondered if he noticed that I'd been distracted lately. I need to pull myself together. I opened a file on my computer and started working. I need to focus on my job. I've decided to go with this travel agency's tour. Sure, it's great to hear you found a tour that you like. I must have spent over a month, maybe close to 2 months, trying to decide. I wonder if there are really people who agonize over a trip for such a long time. I must have caused a lot of trouble for the travel agency. I'm sorry for all the trouble I've been making, a bunch of inquiries, even about the tour details. The female staff at the travel agency gave me a warm smile. You two are going on your honeymoon, right? Yes. It's normal to take your time thinking about your honeymoon. It's a once-in-a-lifetime journey. We've even had a client who spent 6 months planning their trip alongside their wedding. I was genuinely surprised at the mention of 6 months. Is that so? Despite my murmuring, she maintained her smile. An overseas trip is different from a domestic one. There's a sense of something special. Our job is to provide a trip that will be a wonderful memory for our clients. I felt relieved to hear those words. I was immensely grateful to our wedding planner for their assistance during the wedding, and as I realized that various people were supporting us like this, my anxieties about our trip naturally started to fade away. Now I can focus on work without worry. I'm sure my boss will be relieved as well. When George came home in the evening, I gave him the news. I'm home. I've decided on our travel plan. We're going with this travel agency. George replied in a relaxed manner to my childlike excitement. That's good. I'm glad you found a good one. I was a bit taken aback, but after all, I was the one who had always longed for a trip to Europe. Perhaps this is what travel means to George. Hey, are you excited about our honeymoon? Feeling insecure, I found myself asking him. Surprised, he opened his eyes wide and replied, Of course, with you, I'm certain our trip will be great. We should inform our parents later, too. We spent the evening discussing our trip in detail. Sorry for the worry. We've finally decided on our honeymoon destination. I was so happy that I could hear it in my voice, even without realizing it. My boss, sensing my excitement, said with a relieved expression, Oh, good. I'm counting on you until the trip, then. He also handed me some extra paperwork. I didn't even mind the extra work. I was that excited. With both of us working, the timing for us to take the 12 days off needed for a trip to Europe was limited. Because of that, we managed to set the schedule quickly. Guess what, Mom? I couldn't contain my happiness and immediately called my mother when I got home to tell her about the trip. That sounds wonderful. I'm looking forward to the authentic European souvenirs. Something authentic, huh? Maybe I'll look for something stylish, accessories or something. My mother seemed ready to happily send me off on my trip. All I had to do was pack. I've always loved packing for trips. I should also check the weather of the places we're going. Why does preparation for something fun proceed so smoothly? Unlike me, who's impatient, George, with his relaxed personality, seems to take his time with his travel preparations. A week before our trip, both of us had finished packing. Hey, can we buy a new suitcase? I was taken aback by George's sudden question. Suitcase? What's wrong with the one we have? Wait, are we going to repack everything? In response to my rapid-fire questions, George murmured, Well, not quite. I was thinking of preparing an additional new suitcase. It's true that the suitcase we have is of medium size and there's not much space left once we pack 2 people's changes of clothes and other necessary items, including a folding umbrella for the trip. We should have enough space to fit souvenirs for our parents and work colleagues, but if I come across a lovely antique or something, I might end up wanting to buy it. That might be a good idea. We could use one more. When we have to carry them, you and I can each hold one. Yeah, thank you. I was genuinely happy that George showed interest, as he rarely voiced his opinions during our wedding planning or previous trips. And then it was the day before our honeymoon. I felt my heart race with excitement as I realized that tomorrow was finally the day of departure. What if I can't sleep tonight? But it would be a shame to feel sleepy during the trip. While I was preoccupied with such thoughts, I heard the doorknob turn.
I'm home.
Hey, I'm worried I won't be able to sleep tonight because I'm so excited. George? George, with a solemn look on his face, started to speak. What could he want to talk about the day before our trip? There should be no issues with our passports or documents. What's up? He began speaking.
About my parents,
Then a shocking phrase slipped out of his mouth.
I was planning to ask you to take care of my parents' plane tickets, but I forgot. Do you think it's still possible to make an arrangement?
For a moment, I was unable to comprehend what George was saying. Wait, what are you talking about? When I asked, he explained.
I told my parents about the trip after everything on the itinerary was finalized, but they got upset, saying that it's normal for the groom's parents to tag along. By any chance, have you already purchased their tickets?
I felt my blood start to boil at the sudden and unexpected conversation. What are you talking about? A honeymoon is supposed to be for the couple, isn't it? It's absurd for parents to come along.
But my parents were overjoyed when I told them it was a trip to Europe.
But just because they're happy, we had just gotten married and this was supposed to be a special trip for us. Does George think of it as a regular family trip? Then suddenly the doorbell rang. Without making eye contact, I glanced at the intercom screen and saw George's parents. Contrary to my shock, George casually responded through the intercom.
I'll open it now.
And quickly let them into the living room. Sorry to barge in like this. In my mother-in-law's hand was a bag stuffed full of luggage. Mother-in-law? Taking advantage of my stunned silence, my mother-in-law kept talking. A Boston bag might not be suitable for a flight. We heard you guys prepared a suitcase for us. The suitcase was for them? I felt a sense of weakness wash over me. As I looked at George, he had an expression as if this was all to be expected. I don't want to argue with my in-laws, but I couldn't back down on this matter either. After all, we had spent so much time planning this honeymoon. Plus, there's no way we could get additional tickets at this point, and I verified online that the tour bookings are already completely booked. This is our honeymoon, you know. But my mother-in-law answered in a very matter-of-fact manner. So what? George wasn't taken aback either. My father-in-law was standing behind my mother-in-law, holding a huge amount of luggage. A honeymoon is usually just for the couple. In response to this, my mother-in-law replied, Didn't you come to marry into this family? It's only natural that a wife serve her husband's family, isn't it? I understand if it's a family trip, I would gladly go on the trip with the two of you, but a honeymoon is different. Honeymoons and family trips are the same thing. Then how was it when you went on your honeymoon? I was gradually getting irritated, but my mother-in-law, with a triumphant look on her face, responded, At that time, my mother-in-law had a bad leg. It's a daughter-in-law's duty not to push her too hard, isn't it? So you didn't take your mother-in-law on your honeymoon, did you? My mother-in-law was clearly displeased. I knew this would happen the moment I decided to stand my ground. What a difficult girl. We packed with excitement for our trip to Europe, you know. Excitement for our trip to Europe. Just hearing those words made all the struggles and joys I had experienced rush through me, and I couldn't help but feel tears welling up.
Hey, Maggie, isn't it okay if they come?
I heard George's voice coming from beside me.
The more the merrier. If tomorrow doesn't work out, we can cancel and look for a place for the four of us.
Huh? As I looked back in astonishment, my mother-in-law joined in with a mix of laughter. That's right. Oh, I have an idea. How about changing it to a trip to Paris? I want to brag about it to my friends. Her words even made me feel dizzy. I'm holding back because I have my own pride, but to be honest, I feel like bursting into tears right now. Before I knew it, as if weighed down by my mother-in-law's pressure, I found myself sitting on the floor. Then, from above my head came a totally unexpected sentence. It was from George.
I had no idea you hated my parents so much.
Huh? Looking up, I saw him looking down at me with a stunned face. My mother-in-law also chimed in. That's right. It's terrible. I couldn't stand their voices anymore, and I finally screamed hysterically. Why am I being treated like the bad one? It's our honeymoon, for heaven's sake. Why are you ruining such an important trip? George showed no sympathy for my outcry. Of course, he didn't seem to care either.
You've been acting strangely lately.
Huh?
Every time you open your mouth, it's all about our honeymoon. You're not being rational.
George said this coldly.
Mom, Dad, sorry. Could you go home today? You can leave your stuff here.
While saying this, he took his parents to the front door. At the front door, my mother-in-law was making a fuss, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. When he came back after a while, he spoke.
Let's cancel our trip for now. Take a moment to think rationally.
I no longer had the energy to respond to those words. At the same time, I noticed that my feelings for my husband were quickly cooling down. He cared more about his parents than about me. I couldn't imagine continuing as a family with him, facing the challenges of life together, knowing that my mother-in-law will always intervene and yet my husband won't stand up for me. I don't see any happiness in sight. I finally managed to call the travel agency just before closing time. I couldn't possibly enjoy going abroad in this state. The staff who helped me when I made up my mind answered the phone, asking several times if I really wanted to cancel. I clearly communicated my intent to cancel. She seemed to sense various things from the sound of my downcast voice. She briefly explained the necessary points, such as the cancellation fees. I no longer had any feelings of disappointment. It was purely procedural matter. Then, several days passed. During the next few days, there was no conversation between George and me. Our last conversation ended with George saying,
We'll resume the conversation when you've had a chance to reconsider.
But I don't think I did anything wrong. Neither of us apologized or tried to continue the conversation. It was just before dinner when my husband suddenly put a divorce document on the table.
I'm taking my whole family on this trip. If you don't like it, we're getting a divorce.
George said it with a frustrated attitude. Strangely enough, I accepted this as George's answer without much hesitation. I responded right away. Understood. We'll get divorced.
What?
The one who was surprised was George.
Are you serious? Divorcing over just a trip?
You're the one who brought the divorce papers. I occasionally glanced up at George's face as I carefully filled out the divorce papers, making sure there were no mistakes. People might think it's just over a honeymoon, but this man doesn't cherish what's important to me. He won't protect me when it matters. Could I spend my life with such a man? He should go on the trip with his parents if he wants to. I don't need a bleak future. George, unable to back down now, also filled out the form with shaking hands. I'll bring this to the family court tomorrow. I said this as I took the divorce papers from George's hands. A tiny voice saying, "Oh," slipped from George. He may actually be regretting this. But I've made up my mind. This is how our divorce was finalized. Of course, my parents were surprised when I told them about the divorce. My mom suggested that I reconsider, but when I told her about the honeymoon and my former in-laws, she seemed dumbfounded and said cheerfully, "It's a good thing you cut ties with that weird family." I do regret that I caused trouble for my parents and our wedding guests. My colleague who used to tease me as the troubled maiden seemed a bit uncomfortable for a while, but when I said it was the right choice to break up with a grown man who's still dependent on his mother, she seemed to get back to her usual self. On the other hand, it seems that George vented about me being heartless to his colleagues at work. He intended to highlight my lack of common sense, but instead his own absurdity was exposed and quickly spread within his company. He seemed to receive a lot of criticism from his female colleagues in particular, and apparently became known as a mama's boy. He himself was shocked by the gap between societal norms and his family's way of thinking, which led him to make a series of significant mistakes at work. George, who was previously regarded as a laid-back employee, has now transformed into an incompetent and irrational employee. According to a mutual friend, it seems he is going to be transferred to a small branch office in Nebraska. But the situation there is quite severe, and it's obvious that he, who was sheltered and raised by his mother, will eventually quit. By the way, since he suggested the cancellation of our trip, of course I had him pay the cancellation fee in full. I've dealt with a lot, but I'm still a bit hurt. When I let out a sigh without thinking, I made eye contact with a senior colleague passing by. I was taken aback, but she looked at me and said, "Solo trips aren't so bad, you know?" She is very competent at her job, but she always seemed a bit distant, and we didn't have much of a private relationship. I was a bit surprised when she suddenly started talking to me. "A single life isn't bad either." "Huh? I'm actually divorced." She flashed a charming smile as she spoke. There was no trace of tragedy in her smile. Rather, it looked refreshing. "Really? I had no idea." "You see me as someone fully dedicated to work, right? In the past, I was desperately trying to become the perfect wife. I kept pushing myself beyond my limits, constantly restraining myself. I didn't know she had such a past. Until now, I thought I was only interested in work, and she always seemed perfect in my eyes. I was pushing myself too hard. At that time, a bunch of my colleagues got married and quit their jobs all at once, and I guess I was in a rush to get married too. I felt the same way," I found myself saying naturally. "When I save up some money, I go on solo trips. You know, being alone can be quite nice." "Is that so? Why don't you try it once you've saved up some money? Of course, I wouldn't mind accompanying you." I couldn't help but smile at her words, and before I knew it, we were both laughing. I realized I might have been shackled by society's expectations of happiness. I want to become a free spirit like her, not bound by anything. What is my happiness? Is it working? Or maybe having hobbies? Maybe I might find a true life partner. Someone who isn't my ex-husband. In any case, I have plenty of time to think.
My name is Avery. I'm a 62-year-old housewife. My husband, who I was married to for many years, passed away 2 years ago due to a sudden illness. Now, I live modestly, managing the inheritance my husband left me. I have 2 sons. Both are already married. But when my eldest son Henry got married, he and his wife offered to live with me. I said, "I appreciate your concern for me, but I'm still fit and fine on my own. I don't want to be a burden to you newlyweds." But Henry insisted. "I can't bear to leave you to die alone. I'm the eldest son. Let me take care of you. Don't worry about being a nuisance." And so we ended up living together. Henry's wife, Rhea, is still young. She's 9 years younger than Henry, only 23. At first, I worried if such a young girl could handle being a wife, but she was the one Henry chose. I found no reason to object to their marriage, so I accepted it. When we decided to live together, I asked Henry, "Is Rhea okay with living with me? Won't a young girl like her dislike living with an old woman like me?" Henry reassured me, saying, "It's fine. Rhea is kind. She'll get along with you. Besides, having you around will help us with the housework." He was adamant about us living together. I couldn't find a reason to object after hearing that. Sure, I'm getting on in years, and it's too late to start worrying when something happens, thinking that it'd be more reassuring than living alone. I gratefully accepted Henry's proposal. After we had been living together for a while, there was a time when I asked Rhea, "Sorry to ask, but could you bring in the laundry? I'm going out to get groceries for dinner." Up until then, I hadn't often asked her for anything. But that day, I had unavoidable errands to run before shopping, so I decided to ask her. But then Rhea retorted, "Why do I have to do it? I'm busy right now. You should bring it in before you go, shouldn't you?" She seemed busy playing a game on her smartphone. Even before that, she hadn't helped with any household chores. But I chose not to say anything out of consideration. However, seeing her just lying there playing her game that day, I said a bit more firmly, "If it's just a game, you can play it later, right? Could you please help out a bit?" Rhea, looking annoyed, grumbled, "You're always nagging. Whoever's free should do the chores, right? You could bring it in before shopping. You're really annoying." And with a glare at me, she went to the balcony to bring in the laundry. I was taken aback by her rudeness, but I thought it wouldn't do any good to say anything more and upset her further. So I left the house as it was. After that day, Rhea began to harass me. Ignoring me became a daily occurrence. When she didn't like the food I cooked, she would say to Henry, "I can't eat this. Hey, let's go out and eat. Just the two of us." And they would go out to eat, leaving me behind. Henry did try to consider my feelings, saying, "Think about Mom, too. She went through all this trouble to cook." But when Rhea was in a bad mood, all he could do was say, "Sorry, Mom. We're going to eat out today," and follow Rhea's orders. Rhea never did any housework, no matter how much I asked. Instead, she said, "You're not working right. Aren't you ashamed to rely on Henry for everything at your age? It's normal for you to do the chores, isn't it?" She acted as if it was completely natural for me to do all the housework. Rhea accused me of not working, but she wasn't working either. But she felt superior because she was supporting Henry, who was working. I hadn't told Rhea, but I wasn't unemployed. I had a little income from managing the apartment left to me by my husband. I also gave Henry living expenses, so I wasn't completely dependent on him. But Rhea seemed to think that because I wasn't working outside the home, I didn't have any income. So Henry was footing all the bills. Once, when I was cleaning, Rhea shouted at me, "Can't you clean a little quieter? It's noisy." I was just vacuuming normally, but Rhea was on the phone call and was complaining about me to the person on the other end, saying, "Hello, sorry about that. Yeah, it's Henry's mom. She's really noisy, isn't she? She should be able to do the housework quietly." At this point, even I was annoyed, and I told Henry about what had happened that day when he came home from work. "You know, I'm not saying you have to do everything, but Rhea, you've been absolutely no help with the housework. Not only that, but I got scolded just for vacuuming. It's normal to share chores, and of course I do my part. But I can't handle doing everything alone, especially when I get complaints," I told her. Henry replied, "I'm sorry, I really am. I don't think Rhea means any harm. Maybe she was just in a bad mood today. I'll tell her to help out a bit more, so please, cut her some slack today." But he didn't really take the matter seriously. Even so, I hoped that Henry would talk to Rhea, and I decided to watch how things unfolded without saying anything. Half a year passed. Rhea's attitude hadn't changed at all, and she didn't even pretend to do housework. I was completely exhausted from doing all the chores for 3 people and being considerate of Rhea. At that time, my second son Lucas happened to say, "Mom, your birthday's coming up, right? Since your eldest son and his wife will probably celebrate it on the day, let us celebrate it for you today. Renly also has a present for you. So why don't we go out for dinner?" I was invited. Lucas and his wife live in an apartment about 30 minutes away from our house. We didn't get to see each other often, but Renly, Lucas's wife, was kind and gentle, and she cared for me a lot. I gladly accepted Lucas's invitation, saying, "I'd love to. Of course I'll go." That night, after preparing dinner for Henry and Rhea, I went out to dinner with Lucas and his family. They had booked my favorite restaurant and gave me flowers in a bag as a birthday present. I hadn't had such a good time in a while, and I couldn't help but express my honest feelings, saying, "Ah, this is so healing. I haven't felt this happy in a long time." Hearing my words, Lucas asked, "Did something happen with Henry? When you say it's been a while since you've been happy, I get worried. Have you been going through a hard time lately?" I hadn't planned to complain, but I explained that I was doing all the housework because Rhea wouldn't do any, and that I had been yelled at for being noisy and had been spoken to harshly. Lucas, after exchanging glances with Renly, said, "Mom, you don't have to live with them if it's tough. You can live on the income from the stocks and apartment rents that Dad left behind, right? You're only living with them because Henry wanted to, right? But if you're being treated so badly by Rhea, and Henry isn't helping you, you should just stop living with them. If it's hard for you to say it, I'll step in." Renly also said, "If you're lonely living alone, we can live together. I love you very much. Please don't hesitate." I was so happy I could cry. I thanked them for their words and decided to keep trying a little longer, knowing that I had allies. "Thank you, but I'll try a little harder. They're my precious family after all. I really want to get along with Rhea, too," I said. When I came home that night, the dishes they had eaten from were still in the sink. With a sigh, I tried to clean up, but thought, it's only natural for me to do this because I always do it. Let's leave it as it is today, and let the two of them tidy up tomorrow morning. So I left the dishes as they were and went to bed. The next morning, as I was preparing breakfast, Rhea got up. I said to her while cooking, "Good morning, Rhea. I'll prepare breakfast. Could you wash the dishes you used yesterday?" However, Rhea ignored my words and started fiddling with her smartphone as she sat down on the couch. Even I couldn't hold back my irritation at Rhea's attitude, so I raised my voice. "It's common courtesy to wash your own dishes." Then Rhea replied in her usual manner, "I've said it 1,000,000 times. Isn't that your job, Mom-in-law? You know the saying, 'He who does not work, neither shall he eat.' You eat every day, so you have to do the housework." Upon hearing our exchange, Henry hurriedly got up and asked, "What's happening this early in the morning? Are you two arguing?" He looked at me with a puzzled face. I told Henry with a sigh, "I only asked Rhea to wash the dishes you guys ate with yesterday. I just said what's obvious." Hearing my reply, Henry said, "What the hell? This early in the morning?" and tried to go wash his face, seemingly annoyed. But I couldn't contain myself and snapped, "It's not about that. Every single day, I do all the housework, all of it, including yours. Do you understand how hard that is? At least you could wash your own dishes." Hearing me, who rarely gets angry, shout like that, Henry hurriedly said, "Sorry, I'll wash them," and tried to start doing the dishes. But Rhea said, Why does Henry, who works outside, have to do that? You're relying on Henry, so it's your job, Mom-in-law." She stopped Henry's hand, seemingly unsatisfied with him washing dishes. Then she said to me, "You're a poor god of poverty living on a pension, really a nuisance. Get out of this apartment." I had reached my breaking point. "Why do I have to leave my own house? The name on this house is mine, isn't it?" I told Rhea and to Henry. I confessed my true feelings. Rhea seems to be misunderstanding something. "But you understand, don't you, Henry? The ones who need to leave are you two. I can't stand living together anymore. I've reached my limit. Rhea, unable to hide her surprise, asked, What do you mean? How can a jobless mother-in-law run a house? Aren't you relying on Henry? I explained to her, I am the landlord of this apartment. I am not renting. This apartment itself is mine. Sure, I wasn't working outside, but Henry's father left me stocks, apartments, and land when he passed away. I manage those stocks, apartments, and land, and earn enough income to live on my own. I've never relied on Henry financially, even after we started living together. I pay for most of the utilities and food costs. Rhea was speechless, then turned to Henry and said, So we've been living without spending much money. Henry just nodded silently in response to her words. I added, Henry might have wanted to show off to you, Rhea, but there's no way he could take care of all aspects of my life and take you out to eat, go shopping, and so on. Henry himself isn't earning that much yet. At that point, Rhea seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. She changed her attitude, her face pale, and said, I'm sorry, mother-in-law. I didn't know anything, and I've been saying rude things. Please forgive me. If our living together ends, Rhea won't be able to live the way she has been. She realized this and kept repeating, I'm sorry, in a flustered manner. Understanding the situation, they repeatedly apologized in a flustered manner. I told them, I'm not saying I won't forgive you. We're family after all. But living together is out of the question. We need to resolve this. You two should rent a house and live there by yourselves. Henry reacted to my words with desperation. I'd worry if something happened to you, Mom. From now on, Rhea and I will help with housework. I just don't want to leave you alone. However, I reassured him, I'll be fine. If you're that worried, I'll live with Lucas and his family. They offered to live with me when we went out for dinner recently if I was anxious about living alone. I initially told them I'd try a little longer living with you two, but now I realize it's impossible. It may be a bother to Lucas, but I'm going to stay close to them. Henry seemed to understand my firm stance, responding with a mere, I understand, and said nothing more. Rhea, on the other hand, spat out, So you're abandoning us, despite the fact that we've been taking care of you. Her tone suggested I was at fault. I realized there was no point in arguing with her and didn't say anything more. Within a month from that day, Henry and Rhea found a place and moved out. Due to the cost of rent, it seemed they could only afford a fairly old and small apartment. Rhea, who had never worked before, apparently started a part-time job to support their living. Henry informed me that Rhea was constantly complaining about juggling housework and her job. Their life seemed to be filled with nonstop arguments, and Henry seemed completely worn out. Henry kept contacting me saying, If only you'd forgive us. We'd like to live together again. But I had no intention of going through that again. After Henry and the others left, I moved in with Lucas and his family after some time. Even though I told them there was no need to push themselves, Lucas said, It actually helps us a lot to live with you, Mom. Renly really wants to live with you too. She wants to learn how to cook like you do. And so we decided to live together. Since we started living together, they have told me, It's okay to say if there's something you don't like, okay? We'll do what we can when it comes to housework, making sure we don't inconvenience each other. I spend my days cooking with Renly, enjoying my hobbies, and just having a fulfilling time. Right now I am very happy. From now on, I want to live in a way that doesn't destroy this happiness.
You got hit by a car? You always exaggerate things. Who do you think is paying for those hospital bills? Being a housewife must be so easy. Get back home and take care of the house. That's about all you're good for, isn't it? The man laughing at me over the phone is sadly my husband, the man I once vowed to spend my life with. Just a few hours ago, a car hit me while I was walking, and I was rushed to the hospital. My husband's first words to me after hearing from the hospital were just that. No husband should ever say things to his wife who just had an accident. But in a few minutes, he would go from laughing to looking pale. My name is Olivia. I'm 40 years old. I've been married to Benjamin for 12 years. As for our relationship... Hey, you're the housewife, right? What's up with this breakfast? Can't you do better? He takes his bad moods out on me, especially in the mornings. On the table are pancakes, coffee, and bacon and eggs. I didn't skimp on anything. Alright, I'll be more careful. Weren't you supposed to leave early today? After years of living together, you learn how to brush off your spouse's moods. He grumbles, but finishes his breakfast and rushes out the door. Finally, I can start my own meal. Lately, he's been increasingly arrogant. I could divorce him, but there's one reason I don't. Don't you get annoyed, Mom? I don't want to marry someone like Dad. The reason is our daughter Emily, who's sitting across from me. She's only 10, but acts much older. Sometimes we talk like friends. He has his good points. He works hard every day, and I'm grateful. But his attitude sucks. He's making fun of you. I calm my angry daughter and send her off to school. I won't lie, I've thought about divorce. This goes back to when Emily was in kindergarten and got the flu for the first time. She had a high fever and was coughing badly. My husband said, "Emily, I have an important meeting tomorrow. Don't get me sick." What? Our daughter is suffering and that's all you have to say? He retorted. Why did she get sick if she got vaccinated? Did you take her to a quack? I gave up expecting anything from him that day. There's more to this story. It's hard to prevent spreading illness at home. A few days later, I was the one with a high fever. Hey, can you take me to the hospital? I think I caught Emily's flu. I texted him because it hurt to talk. Surprisingly, he replied right away. Wow, you're really useful. Get ready for the hospital. I checked my phone to see. Can't. Call a cab. I might go to my parents' house. I clenched my phone so hard it could break. I get that he can't just leave work. If you suddenly take time off from work, other people will also be inconvenienced. Still, isn't there a kinder way to say it? I glanced sideways and saw Emily, her fever down, sleeping peacefully. I passed out, relieved that at least she was okay. How long did you sleep? When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Olivia, are you okay? My mom and Emily were beside me. Mom said to me as I was dazed, "You called and then Emily was screaming, 'Help, Mom!' We were so worried. Didn't you call Benjamin?" That's right. Mom came and helped me get to the hospital. Turns out I had the flu and was slightly dehydrated. I had an IV in my arm. I thanked my daughter Emily, who was back to her usual self. Emily, did you call Grandma? Thank you for helping Mom. Seeing her blush made me tear up. Just then, Benjamin burst into the room, out of breath. Olivia, are you okay? Mom must have called him. He was out of breath, probably from running. Benjamin, didn't you notice Olivia was feeling off this morning? What would have happened if Emily hadn't called? You need to pay more attention to your family. Mom was choosing her words carefully, but she was angry. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was this bad. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to Olivia and Emily. Mom spoke gently, perhaps reassured by my husband's remorseful look. I was angry, but seeing him genuinely sorry made me forgive him. His attitude improved a bit after that, but he still belittled me sometimes. And for the past year, I've had another concern. I've started a fixed deposit account through a friend who works at a bank. The interest rate is good, so cut back on spending, okay? Like Emily's dance classes. Do we really need that? Hold on, why are you making such important decisions without me? And Emily is not quitting dance. She was shy, and it's the first thing she wanted to do on her own. I couldn't help but get emotional. Emily had said she wanted to dance like the performers we saw at an event when she was in 2nd grade. That's how we started. She's made lots of friends and become more outgoing since she started dancing, especially with Mia, who's the same age. I'm also friends with Mia's mom. Despite this, Benjamin said, "You wouldn't understand complicated financial stuff. But fine, Emily can continue her lessons. Just manage the budget." I quit my job after Emily was born, but it wasn't my choice. I used to work as an office clerk. After maternity leave, I returned to work only to get frequent calls from the childcare center because Emily was sick. I took time off each time and quickly used up all my paid time off. Can you pick up Emily sometimes? It's hard for me to take time off. I asked Benjamin for help. I thought it was strange to ask such a thing. But he joked. Me? No, guys at my work leave early for childcare. Isn't that the wife's job? I was stunned. There's no such thing as roles, okay? In my family, you're the only wife who works. Your mom stayed home, right? I want you to stay home. That's what I was told, so I quit my job. I was worried about my income, but that didn't mean I couldn't make a living. There are also good points about it. We managed financially, and I was relieved to have more time for Emily and myself. I was also happy to be able to spend more time with Emily. Of course, she also has some bad points. But Benjamin stopped helping at home and acted like he was the sole provider. I suggested going back to work now that Emily is older, but he wasn't interested. Being a housewife is a lot of work. If it were a paid job, it would be worth a lot. He doesn't appreciate me enough. Then a life-changing event happened. Usual time, usual path. I was walking home from shopping, carrying heavy bags. I heard a car horn from behind. I turned around too late. A car was speeding toward me. My bags scattered around me. I fell on my butt in shock and then lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My teary-eyed daughter Emily and Mom were by my side. I feel like this has happened before. Did I get the flu again? Grandma, is Mom losing her mind? Both looked worried as I mumbled in my daze. The attending physician, a woman, spoke gently. Emily, calm down. Your mom will be fine. Olivia, do you understand? You were in a car accident. Apparently, the driver had dozed off. The car grazed my shoulder before crashing into a pole. Had I been a few steps ahead, I probably wouldn't be alive. I was horrified when I heard that story. The room fell silent when the phone rang. Mom took my phone from my bag and put it on speaker. Hey, Olivia, got a call from the hospital. You're fine, right? You're always so sturdy. The room went quiet. He kept talking, oblivious to the silence. Stop exaggerating! Who do you think is paying for this hospital stay? Hurry back and take care of the house. That's all you're good for. Is this how you talk to your wife, who just had an accident? Something snapped inside me. I heard the sound of something snapping inside me. I glanced at Mom, her fists trembling. Are you there? Olivia, answer me! My body tenses up to say something back. I was about to respond when someone else beat me to it. Are you the husband? I'm Melissa, the attending physician. Yes. How's my wife? He seemed surprised, probably thinking he was alone with me. Apparently, the same was true of the doctors. Too late for apologies. I heard how you spoke to Mrs. Olivia. She'd be better off without you. He exploded. Who do you think you are? Just a female doctor acting high and mighty. I'm Olivia's attending physician, Melissa. As I mentioned, my daughter Mia attends the same dance class as Emily. Oh, I see. My husband, always wanting to look good, was at a loss for words. Mia's mom is a doctor at this hospital. I'm sure she told her husband, but he probably wasn't listening with her right ear and her left ear anyway. I was planning to divorce you later, but I don't need you anymore. Benjamin, I'm going back to my parents' house after I'm discharged. Don't worry about Emily. Mom will take care of her. Wait, who's going to take care of the house? I felt nothing but disgust for him. Emily chimed in. Who'll take care of the house? What about you? Is there a rule that says you can't do housework? And what you said earlier was disappointing. You're an embarrassment. A pathetic husband who is told this much by his own daughter. But I think your mother-in-law and father-in-law will be inconvenienced by you barging in, right? If you find out, then think again. Mom, who had been silent, finally spoke. Hello, Benjamin. This is Olivia's mom. We don't mind at all. Don't worry about it. She spoke softly, but her eyes were anything but soft. Ah, so you're there too, mother-in-law. But you see, didn't you hear me? I said we don't mind. Remember when Olivia had the flu? I asked you to be more considerate of your family. Is my daughter your personal maid? I thought I sent her off as your wife. Mom's words left my husband speechless. If you have any objections, feel free to visit us anytime. Dad and I will be waiting. He loves his daughter and granddaughter. With that, Mom hung up the phone. I was discharged a few days later with a minor shoulder injury and no head trauma. I moved back to my parents' house and we secretly moved our belongings while my husband was at work. Our home was a mess. Dirty dishes filled the sink, and the laundry was untouched. I ignored it all and returned to my parents' house. A month into our separation, my husband reached out. "I want to talk." I braced myself for the call from my husband. On the agreed day, he showed up at my parents' house with his own parents. As Mom welcomed them in, my father-in-law began to speak. "Olivia, stop being stubborn and come home. You're married. It's your duty to support your husband." My father-in-law's outdated views were echoed by my nodding husband. "Olivia's dad would agree, right? It's time to let go of your daughter." He laughed as if mocking my dad, just like this parent and this child. My dad's response? "Are you serious? If so, I have even less reason to send my daughter and granddaughter back to you." His tone was calm, but his eyes weren't smiling. Wow, Dad is really mad, I thought. My father-in-law's face turned red. "Benjamin, I want a divorce. I'm tired of being let down, again and again. When was the last time you thanked me?" My husband looked down. "I've always tried to support you, Benjamin, but what about you? You keep saying I should be more grateful. Who's going to support me?" My husband's ears turned red. Mom chimed in. "Benjamin, how did the house look without Olivia? Dress shirts don't clean themselves, and shoes won't shine on their own. How was the food?" Mom was as angry as Dad. Still, my husband argued. "But I'm the one working to support Olivia and Emily. Shouldn't she take care of the house?" We were all stunned by his lack of remorse. He glared at me as if to say he wouldn't agree to a divorce. "Do you remember blaming me for our tight budget? I was so frustrated that I started working from home." "What?" "I've been working within his tax bracket, and it's given us some financial breathing room. If you want to act high and mighty, start earning enough to justify it." My husband sneered at me. "You think this is funny? Fine, let's get a divorce. I'd be better off without a woman like you." The next moment, a sharp slap flew through the air. It wasn't from me, nor from my parents, and certainly not from my father-in-law. It was from my mother-in-law, who had been silent all along. "Listening to you, Benjamin? Who do you think you are? The words you should be saying to Olivia are thank you for always supporting me." Everyone, including my husband and father-in-law, was stunned by my mother-in-law's sudden outburst. "What are you talking about? She's the one who wants a divorce. I've done nothing wrong." "Why don't you worry about your son instead of yourself? I'm a human being too, you know. I have my limits, and it seems like I've reached them now." "What?" Both men were silenced by her forcefulness. Caught off guard, my husband finally agreed to the divorce. We immediately started discussing child support and asset division, and that's when I learned something unexpected. "So, how much is in that fixed deposit amount? That's part of the assets to be divided, right?" My husband's face turned pale at my casual question. About that." Before he could continue, my mother-in-law shouted, "Spit it out!" "I haven't actually set up a fixed deposit. I lied." Tears in his eyes, he confessed. "I actually used it for investments. I thought I could make some extra money, but it didn't work out. That's why I've been hard on Olivia." "Really? You should have talked to me. I was pretty into investing before we got married. I probably know more than you. Now I have enough to cover a down payment on a house. But don't worry, it won't be part of the asset division." My husband, who seemed to think of me as a clueless housewife, was flabbergasted. Since then, he's been consistently sending child support payments. He moved back to his parents' home, but his mother is nowhere to be found. She had endured his father's domineering behavior for years, but couldn't take it anymore after his selfish remarks. I can't help but chuckle, thinking about the two men struggling in their messy home. That's what you get for underestimating women. Serves you right. Afterwards, I got a job as a medical receptionist through a friend, Mia's mom. I had also earned a medical administration certificate through a job training program, so I'm managing just fine. I love working in this cozy environment. When the divorce was finalized, my daughter Emily said, "Finally! Took you long enough. I'm fine as long as you're here, Mom." I was taken aback, but vowed to live strongly as a single mom. "Is that all you have to say?" The deep, resonant voice made me flinch. I felt humiliated by my mother-in-law, unprotected by my husband, and even neglected by my daughter during this New Year's celebration. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I felt like crying. My name is Tracy. I dropped out after middle school, started working right away, and got married in a shotgun wedding at 19. My parents are what you'd call gig workers. Unstable jobs mean unstable incomes. That's why I started working so young. I wanted to be independent and have my own cell phone. My husband Linus is 4 years older than me. We met at my workplace. I was captivated by his flashy appearance and wealth. We started dating and ended up in a shotgun marriage. I was 19, he was 23. The legal age in my state was 21, so both families were quite shaken, especially his grandfather, who was furious. He even hit my husband for getting involved with a minor. His grandfather is a strict, intimidating figure that everyone in the family fears. Because of his anger, our wedding was grand, and his family covered all the expenses. I was treated like a princess, treated with great care. That was the peak of my mother-in-law's kindness. 10 years into our marriage, she despises me. Her family runs their own business, founded by my grandfather-in-law, who's still the active CEO. He's a strong leader who's grown the company despite challenges. My mother-in-law manages the office as an executive. My husband works elsewhere now, but plans to take over the family business eventually. They have 70 employees and are apparently doing well. The life of such is wealthy. Their lifestyle is far more affluent than anything I've ever known. Every day, meals, clothing, New Year's celebrations, family gatherings, choosing a kindergarten for our daughter. Every time something comes up, the gap between me and my in-laws becomes painfully clear. I live a very ordinary life, but to my mother-in-law, I must seem poor. She's always frowning when she looks at me. At first, it was subtle digs, but now she openly dislikes me, calling me low class. I've been demoted from princess to servant. My husband initially tried to mediate between us, for the first few years at least. At some point, he started siding with his mother, because she gives him an allowance. She's essentially bought his loyalty. I give him a proper allowance from our household budget, $400 a month. I don't think it's a small amount, but he's chosen to side with her. I wonder how much she's giving him. Another depressing year-end is upon us. Since they run their own business, this is a busy time with client visits and year-end adjustments for employees. I've traditionally taken on the household chores for my in-laws during this period. I juggle this with my own work and household tasks. Tracy, make sure the laundry is done. Don't mess up the fabric softener for the towels. And the car needs washing. Don't skimp on the finish. For dinner, make beef stew. Beef, not chicken or pork. Your taste is inferior to ours. Don't leave water spots in the sink. Also, double check the names on the greeting card. All right, got it. I might as well be a housekeeper. If I were getting paid, I'd be more motivated. But there's not even a word of thanks. It's disheartening. Yet my mother-in-law, who claims she's too busy with work to handle household chores, somehow finds the time to critique my housekeeping. If I cut corners, she complains. It's a hassle. Ugh, car washing, huh? I guess just sticking it in a car wash won't cut it. It has to be spotless inside and out to pass her inspection. Washing a car in the cold at the end of the year is the last thing I want to do. It's depressing. My daughter's school is on winter break. Christmas is over, and the last day of the year has finally arrived. The exhausting end-of-year servitude is finally over. This is the end of my work at my in-laws' house. My duties at my in-laws' are done until next year's holiday season. Or so I'd like to say. But New Year's brings its own set of tasks. Various people come to my in-laws for New Year's greetings. Relatives, business associates, friends of my husband's grandfather. My mother-in-law is busy entertaining them. As a result, she dumps even more chores on me. Cooking, dishwashing, shopping, cleaning, answering the phone. I don't even have time to sit down. I eat standing up in the kitchen, squeezing meals in between chores. My mother-in-law and husband are chatting happily with the relatives who come for New Year's. Everyone's had a bit to drink, and their voices are loud. My husband keeps passing drinks to his mother. My daughter is playing board games with the other kids. Everyone seems to be having a good time. I work non-stop, listening to their joyful voices. It feels like I'm a throwback to the wives of a bygone era during New Year's. I'm used to it by now, so whatever. Let's give out gift cards, everyone! Here you go, gift cards for all! My mother-in-law starts handing out gift cards to the kids. Oh, I need to give out gift cards too. I quickly grab the gift cards I'd prepared and head out of the kitchen. Happy New Year! We have gift cards too! Wait, what's going on? When I get to the kids, they all look stunned. Only my mother-in-law is in high spirits. The difference between her and the kids is striking. The children look at me cautiously. What? What's the matter? Well... The oldest boy starts to say something, but stops. He looks at the gift card in his hand, then at my daughter, who has nothing. All the other kids have cards too. My daughter looks down, her face sad. Tracy, starting this year, we won't be giving your child a gift card. Oh, is that so? If there's none, there's none. But why single out my daughter? And to announce it like that in front of the other kids? That's just cruel. The other kids look confused too. Whether she notices or not, my tipsy mother-in-law cheerfully says, "That's right, a gift card from our family would be too much for the child of a dropout." What? I'm stunned by her unexpected words. What? Because I'm a dropout, you'll give to the other kids, but not my daughter? You're discriminating against my daughter for that reason? Discrimination sounds so harsh. It's a natural distinction. I've learned what kind of a person a dropout is over these 10 years. Your daughter probably has the same low-level tastes as you, so it's nonsense to spend money on her. What's natural about that? My being a dropout has nothing to do with my daughter. I lost my cool and yelled, forgetting all formalities. My mother-in-law's eyes widened at my lapse in decorum. Well, what's with that tone? Who cares about tone right now? No parent would stay quiet when their child is insulted. Insulted? Who do you think you are? Your only asset is your youth. You have nothing else. You're a dropout who can only do housework. I'm an executive in a company, far more accomplished than you. That has nothing to do with our daughter. You said something terrible to her. Apologize. And you! Say something! Huh? Me? My husband was snacking on fruit on the sofa. His own wife and mother are arguing, and he's just chilling? Is he dense? What an idiot. Well, about the gift card, He popped another piece of fruit into his mouth, then mumbled, "Why don't you give some money to Mom? You're always relying on her." What? You're the one getting an allowance and relying on her. Can't you see our daughter is hurt? She's right in front of you, in plain sight, from that sofa. The issue here isn't about the gift card, it's about how mother-in-law is hurting our daughter. My son has a point. You should show respect to your in-laws, even if they're just that by marriage. Would you like to take the small amount gift card you're holding? My mother-in-law laughed haughtily. My husband was only interested in his fruit. This is the worst. What's with this mother-son duo? I've always been treated poorly, but this is a new low. Is it because they've been drinking? That's no excuse. You're despicable! I yelled at my husband. He frowned. Just then, "Is that all you have to say?" A deep, resonant voice made me flinch. It was grandfather-in-law, who had been silent until now. He was sitting deeply in the sofa, eyes closed, yet he exuded an overwhelming presence. I thought I had already hit rock bottom this New Year's, being ridiculed by my mother-in-law, unsupported by my husband, and neglected by my daughter. Could something else happen? I felt like crying, but I couldn't back down. No, there's more! Yes, I'm a dropout. Yes, I don't have an education, but I work hard. Saying I can only do housework because I'm a dropout is a prejudice, and it has nothing to do with my daughter. When I talked back to grandfather-in-law, my husband looked shocked. Like, are you insane for talking back to scary grandfather-in-law? My mother-in-law was smirking. She must be imagining me getting put in my place by grandfather-in-law. All right, I understand, Tracy. I get your point. Grandfather-in-law slowly stood up and clenched his fist. I braced myself, closed my eyes, and looked down. Ouch! The one who screamed was my husband. Grandfather-in-law had swung his fist down onto my husband's head. My husband was disoriented by the sudden pain. I was stunned. So was my mother-in-law. Grandfather-in-law looked furious. You big idiot! What are you doing sitting on the sofa? Huh? While your wife and daughter are being insulted, you do nothing? Explain yourself. Well, it's true that Tracy is a dropout. If you're going to say that, then I'm a dropout too. I know, but you know I'm a dropout, yet you still belittle people for it? Grandfather-in-law's voice, filled with anger, made my husband's eyes widen. He might have known about grandfather-in-law's educational background, but clearly didn't think it was important. Grandfather-in-law then turned to my mother-in-law. I dropped out of middle school and went straight to work. I saved money and started a company. If what you say is true, then I'm also a useless person who can only do housework. Don't think you can insult me and get away with it. Grandfather-in-law is a man who returns favors and holds grudges. He built his company with that indomitable spirit, and now he's angry, feeling insulted. My mother-in-law started to stammer her defense. No, it's different. I didn't mean to insult you, Dad. I was just saying that Tracy is a dropout. As she said dropout again, grandfather-in-law's face grew even more menacing. Don't think I'll let you forget the struggles I've been through. Do you know how hard it was to be looked down upon by competitors and clients just because I'm a dropout? Yes, I know, but... My mother-in-law was taken aback. Grandfather-in-law was erupting like a volcano. His explosive anger was terrifying. Since you're my dropout daughter, you must also have a poor sense of judgment. Probably why your husband left you. Truly pitiful. Dad, we're not talking about that now. I thought you would have learned your lesson after the first painful experience. Have you forgotten how much you had to pay your ex-husband in emotional damages? You haven't changed. Pathetic. My mother-in-law had a past where her spouse left her, which happened when my husband was in high school. She considers her divorce a stain on her life and gets upset when it's mentioned. I never asked for details. But from grandfather-in-law's tone, it seemed her personality was the issue. I saw relatives who had come for New Year's greetings quietly leaving. What an unfortunate start to the year for them. Spending money on you, who never learns from her mistakes, is nonsense. Once the New Year's holiday is over, you'll be removed from your executive position. You'll switch to part-time. What? My mother-in-law let out a voice of despair, but she couldn't defy grandfather-in-law, who held absolute power in this house. Linus, you're always relying on Mom, right? Yeah? Then you should be the one giving her money. You're the one most taken care of. What? You said it yourself earlier. Was that a lie? Faced with grandfather-in-law's piercing gaze, my husband frantically pulled his wallet from his back pocket. A high-end, beautiful wallet, bought with the allowance from his mother. In his haste, the wallet dove into a glass of liquor on the side table, getting soaked. My wallet was soaked. He pulled out damp bills and handed them to my mother-in-law, who pinched the wet money between her fingers. Mother-in-law picked up the liquor-soaked bill with his fingers. Now, you're next. Grandfather-in-law's eyes locked onto my mother-in-law. He looked like a lion eyeing its prey. You're also taken care of by me. You have something to give, don't you? Yes. My mother-in-law ran to her bag and pulled out her wallet. In her haste, the wallet slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. Here's a rerun of my husband's behavior. I took the money he gave me and handed it over to grandfather-in-law. Thank you for always being so kind to us. Mother-in-law snatched the money and grandfather-in-law handed it to my daughter. Frozen by the adult confrontation, my daughter looked up at grandfather-in-law with fear. Grandfather-in-law spoke in a low, authoritative voice. This is a gift card from me to you. Use it for something that benefits you. My daughter was astonished by the wad of bills, an amount she had never held before. Tracy? Yes. I straightened my back as I responded. It's my turn now. I'm scared of what he might say. Honestly, I'd rather be nagged by mother-in-law. As I waited nervously, grandfather-in-law softened his voice a bit. Tracy, would it be alright if your daughter and grandchild go back to your family home? If it's okay with them, take some food and celebrate the new year there. I have to talk with these two fools. I think that would be fine. Even if my family says no, we're going. It's okay. What grandfather-in-law pointed to was a special New Year's meal. His house, always busy with New Year's visitors, had ordered several such meals. It was the most luxurious one. I braced for mother-in-law's objection, but she seemed preoccupied with what grandfather-in-law would say next. She didn't react at all. I quickly wrapped up the food and cleared the table. My daughter helped me. Then grandfather-in-law said, "Let your daughter and grandchild do it. Go quickly." As soon as grandfather-in-law said that, mother-in-law and my husband hurriedly stood up and started gathering the dishes. My daughter and I exchanged the glances and left. My parents were surprised by the sudden visit, but welcomed us warmly. The New Year's celebration at my family home was simple, with no decorations. The meal was also simple, and of course, there was no alcohol. Then came the lavish meal we brought. My parents were delighted and called my in-laws to thank them. Mother-in-law's voice on the phone sounded weak and deflated. My daughter and I stayed for 2 nights and returned home. For the first time since getting married, we had a relaxed New Year's celebration and felt happy. When we got home, a lot had happened. First, my husband and mother-in-law had been severely scolded by grandfather-in-law and had become meek. They stopped complaining and making snide remarks. My husband also stopped siding with mother-in-law. Furthermore, my husband had lost his path to eventually taking over as president from grandfather-in-law. Grandfather-in-law had nominated a successor from among the employees. The person chosen had contributed to the company for many years and was trustworthy. He was well-versed in the business and had the employees' trust. Honestly, I think the company is safer in his hands than in my husband's. As promised, mother-in-law was removed from her executive position and fired before the New Year's break ended. She was rehired as a part-time employee at grandfather-in-law's company. The administrative tasks mother-in-law had been handling were delegated to someone else. That person turned out to be more efficient and accurate than mother-in-law. Between the new president and the smooth transition of mother-in-law's duties, I'm truly impressed by grandfather-in-law's talent in human resources. He's a strong leader, no doubt about it. Mother-in-law's income took a nosedive after she lost her executive position. As a result, my husband no longer receives an allowance from her. The employees who used to flatter mother-in-law for being the boss's daughter have also changed their tune. They're keeping their distance, not wanting to incur the boss's wrath. Mother-in-law has lost the platform where she used to strut around. Now she's working quietly, humbled. My daughter has become more critical of my husband. He didn't defend her when mother-in-law said terrible things, and that's the reason. It's his own fault. After being told by mother-in-law that all I could do was housework, I made up my mind. I started attending a correspondence high school. I used to do housework while my daughter did her homework. But since that incident, my husband has been more proactive about doing chores, freeing up some time for me. I've been using that time to study. My daughter smiles when she sees me studying. She started helping with the housework voluntarily and shares more about her school life. I realized something during this New Year's confrontation with mother-in-law. I had given up on myself, thinking I was just a dropout. Well, it's time to shake off that mindset. Aim for valedictorian. I can do it! My mother passed away from an illness when I was in elementary school. Since then, my father had been raising me, but he started bringing a woman around. Patricia, nice to meet you. She smiled as she said that, and I felt something in her that reminded me of my mother. She seemed much younger than my father, but she was kind to me, and when my father proposed remarriage, I accepted, right away. Now I would have a mother too. For my younger self, this was a joyous occasion. I still remember it, even 30 years later. Back then, I never thought things would turn out like this. My name is Patricia, a 40-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband and daughter. For about a year now, I've been visiting my father in the hospital where he's been admitted. Cancer was found in him, and by that time, it was too late for surgery. He's now in palliative care, but he's outliving the prognosis given by the doctors. When my family and I visit, he's delighted to see his granddaughter's face, and it lifts his spirits. Every time I see my father smile, I remember the past. My mother died, and 3 years later, my father remarried. Looking back, I realized that as a child who lost her mother, I often asked my father, "Can you come to open house? Can you make it to field day? When can we go out next?" Maybe he thought I needed a mother. Fortunately, my grandparents lived nearby, so they looked after me when my father was at work. But when they came to school events, I was laughed at by my friends, and I even told them not to come to school anymore. Everyone else had their mothers, but I was different. Now I should be grateful to my grandparents, but back then, as a child, I couldn't think that way. My father remarried a woman named Jessica, who was 10 years younger than him. She had a smile like my mother's, so I felt comforted by it. I couldn't quite call her mom, but I began to think of Jessica as my mother. Jessica loved me too. But 3 years later, after my brother was born, everything changed. It's natural for her to adore her own son. I might have forgiven that, but Jessica started to be harsh with me. "You're really not a cute child, are you?" After hearing that, something changed inside me. It became hard to be at home, but as a middle schooler, there was nothing I could do. I used to visit my grandparents, but Jessica's snide comments made it hard to go. I didn't want to worry my father or grandparents, so I couldn't even talk to them about it. I just endured. My brother clearly knew he was favored, and he joined Jessica in being mean to me. I left home as soon as I graduated from high school, finally escaping Jessica's snide remarks. More than 10 years later, my father said something surprising. Was it Jessica's fault that I left home, or did I really want to go to college? When I asked my father why he brought this up, he said he overheard Jessica talking to my brother. She had said that it would be a waste to pay for my college, so she made sure I didn't go. And she told me to move out and live on my own. And they were laughing about it, parent and child. My father had begun to notice that things might not be going well between Jessica and me, but he never thought that she and my brother had disliked me so much, and for so long. I told him everything honestly. How things were good at first, how she was kind, how it all changed after my brother was born, how I couldn't tell my father or grandparents, and how I never intended to tell my father, since my brother was important to him too. My father apologized to me. However, I'm already out of the house and no longer a child. There's no particular problem even if I'm estranged from my mother-in-law. And so, time passed. When I went to visit my father, I sometimes ran into Jessica and my brother. Something about Jessica seemed off. I overheard her whispering with my brother. "How long will it last? How much inheritance is there?" I couldn't believe they were talking about such things in the hospital. She seems to visit often, perhaps to appear devoted, but the other day she took all the snacks brought as gifts and left right away. Unbelievable. My father sighs at Jessica and my brother's behavior. He told me he wanted to leave me more inheritance and said he would consult a lawyer. I was surprised at first, but apparently since I left home, my father had been treated with disrespect. I wish he had told me sooner, but he didn't want to worry me, he said. Parents and children think alike, don't they? My father's smile as he said this was memorable. One day when I went to visit, my father was out for a test, so I decided to take his laundry home. Jessica and my brother came in. "Oh, here again? Trying to show how much you love Dad to get more inheritance, huh?" Jessica said, laughing. I had a bad feeling, so I said I was going to the restroom, left my things, and exited the room. When I returned about 10 minutes later, Jessica was hurriedly hiding something. I just greeted her and left. A month later, my father passed away suddenly. Time flew by with the wake and funeral. Once everything was over, I went back to my parents' house to sort out my father's belongings. He had asked me to do so while he was alive. Then Jessica came. "Don't take anything valuable." I was stunned by her words. Then she and my brother brought an envelope. "Oh yes, about the inheritance? He said he's not leaving anything for you." "What?" I didn't understand. Inside the envelope was a paper marked as a will. "My daughter, who quickly abandoned her parents' house, has no intention of leaving an inheritance. Instead, I'll leave it to my devoted wife and son," Jessica said. There's no way my father would say that. But indeed, in my father's handwriting, the will stated that the inheritance would go to his wife and son. Aren't wills supposed to be unsealed, only in the presence of a lawyer? I argued with my limited knowledge, and she said this was a copy, and the official document was with the lawyer. Jessica didn't stop. "I'm relieved to have had a hard-working husband. Now my life is secure. I can live a wealthy life with my only son." My brother was smirking along with her. The disappointing daughter must take after her mother, marrying a man with no real income. How pitiful. I was furious at those words. What? What do you know about my mother? And my husband is a much better person than you, and he earns enough to allow me to be a homemaker. I could forgive her talking about me, but I was enraged when she spoke about my mother and husband. However, Jessica was unfazed. "Well, that doesn't matter. Anyway, I've got the inheritance. Just take the worthless things as keepsakes. Now please, leave, stranger." I never thought she could be this kind of person. All she talked about was inheritance and money. I didn't want anything more to do with her. Understood. Jessica smirked at my words and brought out a large travel bag. "Well, we're going on a 3-week vacation. Now that we have the inheritance, we'll have a blast." I was amazed that she could do such a thing right after her husband's death. I left my parents' house, speechless and wondering why my father never divorced such a person. The next day, a man claiming to be a lawyer appeared at my door. He had known my father for a long time and smiled nostalgically at me. That's when I learned a shocking truth. Jessica and my brother had gone on vacation. Apparently, they wouldn't be back for 3 weeks. During that time, I went to my parents' house to sort things out and requested the house be demolished. My father had arranged everything before his death, and the demolition went smoothly. On the day Jessica and my brother returned from vacation, I ambushed them with a lawyer at the site where my parents' house once stood. They screamed. "What is this? What's going on?" "I had the house demolished. Everything that wasn't mine or my father's is stored in a self-storage unit." "What are you talking about? This is our house. How dare you demolish it without permission? Compensate us, right now." Jessica yelled at me, but I calmly replied, "This house and land are mine, so I can do what I want. Besides, my father told me to demolish it." Jessica, furious, showed me the will from earlier. "Look at this will! It says it's ours!" I was amazed at how important the inheritance was to her, that she took the will on vacation. "That will is a fake," I said, and Jessica was furious. "That's impossible! Look! The date and name are written here!" I was astonished at her desperation and retorted, "My father had entrusted the real will to a lawyer, and he had arranged for the inheritance. It states that only part of the savings goes to you two, while the house, land, and other savings go to me. Also, my father had arranged for the demolition of this old house, saying it would be better to sell the land." My father, realizing that Jessica and my brother were only interested in the inheritance, had consulted a lawyer after being hospitalized. Every time Jessica visited the hospital room, she pressured him to write a will, leaving the inheritance only to them. She even said the hospital fees were a waste and that he should die soon. It seems that even my father was furious about this, but if he divorced now, he'd have to divide the property. He thought that if he had to leave his assets to such a wife, he couldn't divorce. Over and over, he was told about the will, and my father said, "I wrote the will in the presence of a lawyer. This is a copy of it," and handed it to Jessica. That seems to be the paper from earlier. It seems that Jessica and my brother are to receive a few $1,000s each, but according to the lawyer, they were together as husband and wife, and he's her real son. There's no love, but there's compassion, so he decided to leave that much. Jessica and my brother were stunned, but I spoke even harsher words. You're lucky to even get a few $1,000s, but you destroyed the will, didn't you? In that case, you lose all rights to inherit. Then Jessica was visibly shaken. What are you talking about? That's not true. At that point, I played the voice recorder. It was the voice recorder I had hidden in my belongings when I said I was going to the bathroom, after finding my father was out for a test when I entered his hospital room. The conversation between Jessica and my brother, who came in later, was perfectly recorded. It included the fact that my father was angry at Jessica's attitude and wrote a will leaving everything to me, and that they had destroyed it. The day before, Jessica and my brother had visited, but my father was furious at their usual attitude. In that flow, he called a lawyer to write a will leaving all his inheritance to me, and he had kept the written will. That day, Jessica and my brother came to the hospital room, probably to get forgiveness from my father. But unluckily, it was me in the hospital room, not my father. However, they found the will while I was away and tore it up. With this, the will is invalid. Now all we have to do is make him rewrite it to leave all the inheritance to us. Though it's only a voice, I can picture them grinning. What they hid in a hurry when I returned was the torn up will. You really are a nasty girl. I hear the same line after decades, but I'm not a child anymore. I laughed at that. I don't care. It was my childhood home too, but I'd rather lose it than let you two live there. Then my brother interrupts the conversation. Hey, Mom, what about the $10,000 you spent on the trip? Hearing this, Jessica is visibly shaken. Apparently, she thought my father's inheritance was coming and had been spending quite lavishly. I wonder how one can spend $10,000 in just 3 weeks. Jessica suddenly changes her attitude and turns to me for help. Patricia, we're family, aren't we? You'll share a little with us, right? What? What are you thinking? I don't consider you family. Besides, your son is in the prime of his career, so he can pay that amount right away, can't he? Since he's good enough to belittle someone's husband, he'll surely earn it for you, won't he? I left Jessica and my brother, who were in a state of confusion, and walked away from the scene. Later, I found out that my brother had apparently quit the company he used to work for. He made a mistake at work and didn't like being guided by his boss, so he predicted that he could live without working, now that he had my father's inheritance. And he had been wandering around, without even looking for a new job. It seems he had a hard time finding a place to live, but somehow he rented an old apartment, and the two of them started part-time jobs. I thought it was strange for someone in the prime of their career, almost 30, to be working a part-time job, but he probably couldn't find a new position. Jessica had always been a housewife, so she seems to be struggling with work, but this is the retribution for expecting my father's inheritance. The land where my father's house once stood is now being used as a parking lot, serving the residents. My father would surely be pleased. I'm truly glad I was able to protect my father's legacy.